The Israeli-occupied territories are the territories still occupied by Israel following the Six-Day War of 1967. They consist of the Palestinian territories of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip, much of the Golan Heights from Syria, and, until 1982, the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. Israel maintains that the West Bank is disputed territory and asserts that since the disengagement from Gaza in 2005, it no longer occupies it. The Palestinian Authority, the EU, the International Court of Justice, the UN General Assembly and the UN Security Council consider East Jerusalem to be part of the West Bank and occupied by Israel. Israel considers all of Jerusalem to be its capital and sovereign territory. The International Court of Justice, the UN General Assembly and the United Nations Security Council regards Israel as the occupying power. UN Special Rapporteur Richard Fall called Israel's occupation an affront to international law. The Israeli High Court of Justice has ruled that Israel holds the West Bank under belligerent occupation. According to Talia Sasson, the High Court of Justice in Israel, with a variety of different justices sitting, has repeatedly stated for more than 4 decades that Israel's presence in the West Bank is in violation of international law. Israeli governments have preferred the term disputed territories in the case of the West Bank. The first use of the term territories occupied was in United Nations Security Council Resolution 242 following the Six-Day War in 1967, which called for the establishment of a just and lasting peace in the Middle East, to be achieved by the application of both the following principles: withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories occupied in the recent conflict, termination of all claims or states of belligerency, and respect for the right of every state in the area to live in peace within secure and recognized boundaries. Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem in 1980 and the Golan Heights in 1981 has not been recognized by any other country. United Nations Security Council Resolution 478 declared the annexation of Jerusalem null and void, and required that it be rescinded. United Nations Security Council Resolution 497 also declared the annexation of the Golan null and void, following withdrawal by Israel from the Sinai Peninsula in 1982, as part of the 1979 Israel-Egypt Peace Treaty. The Sinai ceased to be considered occupied territory. Israel unilaterally disengaged from Gaza in September 2005, and declared itself no longer to be an occupation of the Strip. However, as it retains control of Gaza's airspace and coastline, it continues to be designated as an occupying power in the Gaza Strip by the United Nations Security Council, the United Nations General Assembly and some countries and various human rights organizations. Overview. The significance of the designation of these territories as occupied territory is that certain legal obligations fall on the occupying power under international law. Under international law there are certain laws of war governing military occupation, including the Hague Conventions of 1899 and 1907 and the Fourth Geneva Convention. One of those obligations is to maintain the status quo until the signing of a peace treaty, the resolution of specific conditions outlined in a peace treaty, or the formation of a new civilian government. Israel disputes whether, and if so to what extent, it is an occupying power in relation to the Palestinian territories and as to whether Israeli settlements in these territories are in breach of Israel's obligations as an occupying power and constitute a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions, and whether the settlements constitute war crimes. Sinai Peninsula. Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt in the 1967 Six-Day War. It established settlements along the Gulf of Aqaba and in the northeast portion, just below the Gaza Strip. It had plans to expand the settlement of Yamit into a city with a population of 200,000, though the actual population of Yamit did not exceed 3,000. The Sinai Peninsula was returned to Egypt in stages beginning in 1979 as part of the Israel-Egypt Peace Treaty. As required by the treaty, Israel evacuated Israeli military installations and civilian settlements prior to the establishment of normal and friendly relations between it and Egypt. Israel dismantled 18 settlements, 2 Air Force bases, a naval base, and other installations by 1982, including the only oil resources under Israeli control. The evacuation of the civilian population, which took place in 1982, was done forcefully in some instances, such as the evacuation of Yamit. The settlements were demolished, as it was feared that settlers might try to return to their homes after the evacuation. Since 1982, the Sinai Peninsula has not been regarded as occupied territory. Golan Heights. Israel captured the Golan Heights from Syria in the 1967 Six-Day War. A ceasefire was signed on the 11th of June 1967 and the Golan Heights came under Israeli military administration. Syria rejected UNSC Resolution 242 of the 22nd of November 1967, which called for the return of Israeli-occupied state territories in exchange for peaceful relations. Israel had accepted Resolution 242 in a speech to the Security Council on 1 May 1968. In March 1972, Syria conditionally accepted Resolution 242, and in May 1974, the agreement on disengagement between Israel and Syria was signed. In the Yom Kippur War of 1973, Syria attempted to recapture the Golan Heights militarily, but the attempt was unsuccessful. Israel and Syria signed a ceasefire agreement in 1974 that left almost all the heights under Israeli control, while returning a narrow demilitarized zone to Syrian control. A United Nations observation force was established in 1974 as a buffer between the sides. By Syrian formal acceptance of UN Security Council Resolution 338, which set out the ceasefire at the end of the Yom Kippur War. Syria also accepted Resolution 242. On 14 December 1981, Israel passed the Golan Heights Law, extending Israeli administration and law to the territory. Israel has expressly avoided using the term annexation to describe the change of status. However, the UN Security Council has rejected the de facto annexation in UNSC Resolution 497, which declared it as null and void and without international legal effect, and consequently continuing to regard the Golan Heights as an Israeli-occupied territory. The measure has also been criticized by other countries, either as illegal or as not being helpful to the Middle East peace process. Syria wants the return of the Golan Heights, while Israel has maintained a policy of land for peace based on Resolution 242. The first high-level public talks aimed at a resolution of the Syria-Israel conflict were held at and after the multilateral Madrid Conference of 1991. Throughout the 1990s, several Israeli governments negotiated with Syria's President Hafez al-Assad. While serious progress was made, they were unsuccessful. In 2004, there were 34 settlements in the Golan Heights, populated by around 18,000 people. Today, an estimated 20,000 Israeli settlers and 20,000 Syrians live in the territory. All inhabitants are entitled to Israeli citizenship, which would entitle them to an Israeli driver's license and enable them to travel freely in Israel. The non-Jewish residents, who are mostly Druze, have nearly all declined to take Israeli citizenship. In the Golan Heights there is another area occupied by Israel, namely the Shabbat farms. Syria and Lebanon have claimed that the farms belong to Lebanon, and in 2007 a UN cartographer came to the conclusion that the Shabbat farms do actually belong to Lebanon. UN then said that Israel should relinquish the control of this area.